Hi and welcome to Daily TFT Tips. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Syndra. Syndra is a pretty interesting champion. She's pretty popular. She's being played either as a reroll comp or she's a pretty core part for any type of Talon or Scholar comp. And she has a very interesting ultimate and a pretty solid VIP ability. But you're not here to know about how Syndra works. No, you're here because you want to know what doesn't work. But before we get to that, because Syndra has a lot of hidden interactions and unintended interactions, let's just get a baseline idea of what's the thing that's supposed to work. So she casts her ability, she picks up the closest enemy to her and hurls it at the farthest enemy. So far so good. I think already there's one misconception, which is that people think that the furthest enemy is based on Syndra's position, but that's actually not true. It's based on the champion that she picks up. In almost every case, that doesn't make a difference because it's going to be the person that she's got to pick up somebody that's completely next to her, so it's got to be at the same target. But yeah. Anyways, let's go to the cool examples. Here we have our first example, and the first thing you should note, she has blue buff. She starts with full mana. And if you remember right, then champions who sometimes start with full mana can do some wonky things. It's the same for Syndra. So I'm gonna pause really quick just to get an idea of what's happening here. We have two frontliners. We have an assassin who's currently the first unit, and then we have like an MF and a Caitlyn in the backline. So what people would expect right here is that she would pick up the Camille and throw it at Caitlyn because Caitlyn is the furthest unit. But the thing is, what actually ends up happening is that because she's full mana, she considers Echo to be the furthest unit, and end result, she throws it to Echo. Even though at this point, you know, the Echo wouldn't be the first unit. This is pretty interesting. That means that blue buff Syndra, in a lot of cases, can end up throwing the ultimate into her own. Can throw the unit into her own side of the board, which is pretty rare. And as far as I know, it only works if she starts with full mana and the initial target at the beginning of the fight, or the first target at the beginning of the fight, was an assassin. Let's continue with the next example. This is going to be Syndra's arch nemesis. If you think Colossus or QSS is Syndra's biggest problem to face, you haven't met Jace. Melee Jace is CC immune during his ultimate. Normally that would mean that Syndra would probably deal some damage, right? Nope. If Jace casts, the Syndra ult fizzles. As you can see, right on the right side, you see the damage, right? He has not dealt any magic damage in this fight. Okay, this was the first pickup. If you ever want to counter a Syndra on the current patch, put a Jace in her face. Preferably give him stuff that, like blue buff, that makes him cast a lot more. This is one of the hardest counters for Syndra right now because she can fizzle 4 or 5 times in a row if you get really unlucky with the timing. Especially if you're playing Syndra reroll, this can completely ruin your game, so definitely something for you to keep in mind. Here we have an example of what the Jace interaction, I believe, should look like. As you know, against QSS and Colossus and in general, and against Silco Ultimate as well, what you're going to see here is the intended mechanic, which is that, well, as long as her first initial target is a Colossus, in this case, bam, everybody gets knocked up, right? It's pretty interesting. It means that against CC immune units, the ultimate works perfectly fine and there's 0 cast time. It can even be an advantage to have, in some cases, it can be an advantage for Syndra to be targeting a CC immune unit at the start of the fight. Most of the times you don't want it, but it's definitely not a wasted Syndra ultimate, and Syndra is not helpless against CC immune units. And before we wrap up this video, I wanted to showcase one last interaction which has to do with Syndra's ability being able to get interrupted. So the way it works is a little bit like this. If Syndra grabs somebody, that doesn't mean that person who gets grabbed is in any kind of way CC immune or untargetable. In this case, we have a Braum who's going to ult at the same time as the Syndra, which in return will now interrupt the Vi from flying into the Caitlyn, as you can see here. the Caitlyn ended up getting a knockup, but that was from Braum, not from Syndra. You have to think of it like this. Once the person gets interrupted, then that is the position where the Syndra ultimate, the damage, the circle, the knockup from VIP Syndra is going to end up applying. It's not something that's very easily abused, but it's something that can totally lose you a fight. Definitely something to keep out. It's something to keep an eye out for. If you're playing a lot of Braum, Lulu, or Alistar, these types of interrupts that are capable of interrupting the Syndra ultimate. In most cases, though, it's just something useful to know and not something that will impact your game a lot. Anyways, that was it for me today. See you guys tomorrow.